Once upon a time, in a little village, there lived a giant in a beautiful garden. The giant's garden was filled with lush green grass, colorful flowers, and sweet-scented trees. It was a place of joy and beauty, and the children of the village loved to play there after school. However, the giant was not a friendly giant. He was selfish and didn't like sharing his garden with anyone. One day, while he was away, the children sneaked into the garden to play. When the giant returned, he saw the children running and laughing in his garden, and he became furious. "Get out of my garden! How dare you come here without my permission?" The giant roared, scaring the children away. He built a high wall around his garden to keep the children out. From that day on, the garden was always covered in winter, and spring never came. Years passed, and the giant remained isolated in his selfishness. The village was always covered in winter, and the children had no place to play. The giant, however, was not happy. His garden had become a cold and desolate place, and he felt a deep emptiness in his heart. One day, as the giant sat in his castle, he heard a beautiful sound coming from outside. It was the song of a bird. Curious, the giant went to investigate and saw a tree in his garden covered in white blossoms. The bird was perched on a branch, singing with joy. Touched by the bird's song and the sight of the blossoming tree, the giant's heart began to soften. He realized the mistake he had made by keeping the children away and isolating himself from the world. With regret in his eyes, he approached the tree and asked, "Little bird, why are you singing in my garden? And why is this tree in bloom?" The bird replied, "When you built the wall around your garden, you banished spring and happiness. But today, I bring you a message from the heavens. If you open your heart and let the children play in your garden again, spring will return, and your garden will be filled with joy once more." Deeply moved by the bird's words, the giant knocked down the wall, and the children rushed back into the garden. Instantly, the seasons changed. The snow melted away, and the garden blossomed with vibrant colors. The giant watched as the children played and laughed, filling his garden with warmth and happiness. From that day on, the giant learned the true meaning of selflessness. He became kind and generous, sharing his garden with the children and everyone in the village. The giant's garden became a place of love and happiness, where spring stayed forever. And the giant, who had once been so selfish, lived the rest of his days surrounded by the laughter and joy of the children, knowing that true happiness lies in sharing and caring for others. As the giant spent his days with the children in his garden, he found immense joy in their company. He listened to their laughter and watched them play, realizing that his garden had transformed into a haven of love and friendship. Among the children, there was a small boy who had never been able to reach the branches of the tallest tree in the garden. The giant, seeing the boy's struggle, gently lifted him onto his shoulders. With the giant's help, the boy reached the highest branches and discovered a secret. It was the tree of everlasting life and joy. News of the giant's transformation spread throughout the village, and people began to visit his garden. They marveled at its beauty and felt the love and warmth that emanated from it. The giant welcomed them all, sharing his newfound generosity and kindness. One day, the giant noticed a corner of his garden where winter seemed to persist. In that cold spot, he found a young, wounded swallow, unable to fly south for the winter due to a late injury. The giant carefully cradled the bird in his hands and told him, "Dear swallow, I have learned the value of compassion and selflessness. Stay with me in my garden, and I will keep you warm and protect you." The swallow, grateful for the giant's kindness, decided to stay and become the giant's faithful companion. With the arrival of the swallow, the giant's garden became even more magical. The bird sang beautiful songs, and his presence brought enchantment to the flowers, trees, and every corner of the garden. As the years passed, the giant grew old and weary. One winter morning, he awoke to find the garden covered in snow. But this time, it was not a result of his selfishness, it was the sign that his time on earth was coming to an end. The children noticed the giant's frailty and gathered around him, their faces filled with sadness. The giant smiled at them, his heart full of love and gratitude. He whispered to the swallow, "Dear friend, when I leave this world, let the children know that they have been my greatest treasure. Promise me that they will always be welcome in my garden." With tears in its eyes, the swallow nodded and understood the giant's wish. As the giant took his final breath, the garden was filled with the most beautiful sound the world had ever heard, a chorus of birds and children singing a song of love and remembrance. From that day forward, the giant's garden became a sacred place.